What would make a 9-year-old want to kill themselves? Social media blew up recently with the story of Quaden Bayles, a 9-year-old boy who was bullied because of his dwarfism. There's no doubt that millions of dollars and lots of effort has been spent into stopping schoolyard bullying. So why has nothing changed?
And it's the constant bullying, the name calling, like obviously pointing out his difference. So now we have a very severely suicidal child who's sick of the bullying that is every single day that he attends school or is in public.
Very distressing footage there. As always, anything that we discuss today, feel free to jump onto our Facebook page to discuss and share your thoughts and how you feel about that. But in the meantime, joining me today we have Claire Marsh, a psychologist, and my usual co-host Kent. Great to have you both with us here.
Yeah, good to be here. And welcome, Claire.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
This is, pretty tough. Watching that mum, she's in tears, at the same time that her kid is in tears. And I just feel for them. And it sounds like this is something that has happened over and over again. If you watch the whole video, she says he has actually had suicide attempts before this. This is not the first time, which is why it seems she's desperate and she's going social on this. Although I understand she actually deleted the video later, maybe thinking it wasn't such a good idea after all.
Yeah. It seems to have really captured the world's attention because I think the big shock value in it is that he's so young, and that we typically think that this would happen to someone who's a bit older. Is that a fair comment, that this has captured the world's attention because of that?
Yeah, I think the video is very moving, very emotive, and when I sit down with kids, the majority of the kids I see, rarely has any of them not experienced bullying or teasing on some level. In these days we look at the stats and almost 90% of school kids have experienced that.
And you work with school kids, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, it's interesting. You used the word teasing there, and I guess, what even is the difference between bullying and teasing? Is it the same thing basically?
It's a really good question, and it's a thing that I try to explore with kids when they come in and they talk about that, because I think we've become really hypersensitive around, or hypervigilant around, that word of bullying, and so kids are going to call bullying on a lot of things. So it's really important to explain to them that there's a difference between teasing and bullying, help them to understand that. Teasing is not as severe and not as long term, it's not as targeted. It can be sort of a one-off, and a lot of the time the kid can use their own coping skills to deal with it, whereas bullying can be a lot more severe.
Yeah.
So are there any patterns in sort of what people can end up being targets to bullying? Are there
everything? It's everything, Daniel. This is what kids are like. This is what people are like. Anything that is different about you. When I was at school, I got picked on because I wore glasses. When I was in school in New Zealand, I got picked on because I had an Australian accent. It doesn't take anything. You can be tall, you can be short, you can be, a bit bigger, a bit skinnier, a different race, a funny accent.
That is true. The actual subject of the bullying doesn't really matter, and anyone can be a victim of it. And in fact, that whole word of being a victim, usually the thing that causes the bullying to keep going is the effect that it gets, that the reaction that it gets. So it doesn't matter what it is.
I've been reading this guy in the US, Izzy Kalman. He's a psychologist. He works a lot. He has this Bullies to Buddies program, and he reckons he's really down on the whole anti-bullying movement. He says it's been going for a couple of decades now, and it's failed. It's just flat out failed. In fact, he says the schools that have the anti-bullying programs are in fact the schools at which the level of bullying is the highest. Maybe he's got that backwards, but it seems it just hasn't worked.
There's some substance in that. He actually looked at a whole different range of studies that they looked at the data from the schools that are implementing those anti-bullying programs, and they found that about 86% of them actually didn't work, or it made it worse. Yeah.
The basic thing that he says is, when a kid goes to a teacher or an adult and says, they're picking on me, they're bullying me, and and then the disciplinary process kicks in on that kid or those other kids that are picking on that kid, bullying that kid, teasing that kid, or whatever level it's at, that actually creates more resentment to the kid who's complaining, and they get picked on more. So it's like, you know, don't be a dibber-dobber, you know, sort of thing, you know, snitches get stitches, you know. Was that what it was like in school for you?
Well, I mean, what you're just talking about just reminds me of some reading that I've done, particularly one book in the Bible actually mentions how to resolve conflict with someone. Like, for example, if someone is, say, for example, bullying you, as opposed to sort of going and dobbing on that person, maybe you should go and confront them first and, you know, take them aside privately.
Jesus said this himself, didn't he? He said, if you've got a problem with someone, go to them first, try to sort it out between yourselves. It's only after that you bring other people in.
But obviously that's something you'd expect from a mature adult, right? That's the behavior you'd expect from a mature adult. Can you expect that from kids? Should that be an approach that kids should be taught to take?
Well, this is the thing, we are talking about kids, and I think the whole anti-bullying movement has turned it into a really punitive, even like a criminal approach. There has to be consequences because I guess we're teaching them social norms, but at the same time we do need to go to them and sit down with them and treat them both equally and say that they're both kids, and at some stage
do you mean that the bully and the kid being bullied, you've got to treat them equally? Is that what you're saying?
Right, yeah, in terms of looking at it both as maladaptive behaviour and looking at them both as victims.
So that does raise the question, what would drive a person to be a bully? Is that something that comes from childhood, upbringing?
The way they're treated.
Can we necessarily blame this kid and put full responsibility on them?
Are kids who bullied go on to be bullies?
Yeah.
I mean, that is
what happens when they grow up? That makes me wonder, because we've now got cases where people are suing their bullies for millions of dollars for emotional trauma and damage. Like people who, you know, take these effects on into their later years of life. So yeah, quite a few questions in there, obviously. But yeah, do you think that full responsibility can be placed on a bully, or is there more factors around it?
Well, I guess the main point that I would want to raise about that is that bullying is actually a really developmentally normal behaviour, and you know, we treat it in an irrational way that it's you know, absolutely wrong and it should never happen, but in reality it's a normal dominance behaviour that kids are experimenting with that, and that's why 90% of kids are experiencing it. So in reality we're not doing them any favours by having an irrational or
shutting it down at every juncture,
an unrealistic expectation that we're anti and it's never going to happen.
And I guess good parenting and good education has to involve helping kids to grow up, and that means to develop coping skills, and those coping skills including coping with conflict, coping with like dominant sort of behaviours.
Having that resilience.
That's right.
And
the fact
deal
is,
with that.
Most kids will respect another kid who shows confidence, who, you know, doesn't react and scream and freak out. I mean, that's just the reaction they want, really. Yeah. And it's hard to learn, but it's just an absolutely essential, you know, growing up skill.
Where do you draw the line? Because what you're suggesting is like that this is fine and we should just let it play its part. Whereas what you're suggesting is that maybe it's being too over-policed at the moment. What if there's a child who's being bullied and whatever, and like everything you said, but now has like, you know, mental health issues because of it. So at what point should someone step in, and who should that person be? Should the parents, like I mentioned, should they be teaching their kids the skills to be able to go and conflict resolve on their own, or should parents be stepping in?
Yeah, look, we're not saying that it's fine, and it isn't okay, and there's a lot of behaviours that we want to teach kids to grow out of and give them the coping skills and replace that with you know, better behaviour.
Yeah.
So I think it's the job of all of those people, to be
a lot of
honest.
things kids do to each other in the playground, if you did it as an adult, you'd end up in court.
Right, yeah, and that's the consequence we face when we're an adult.
Yeah, wow. So as a psychologist, Claire, like when you encounter this sort of thing, talking with parents, talking with kids, do you actually have any practical strategies that, you know, helps kids move beyond bullying?
Yeah, a lot of it is equipping the child, you know, and the person that we see as the victim, you know, to actually help them with those skills to empower them rather than keep them in that victim mindset. Otherwise, they're just going to keep on reacting, and that reaction is going to keep it perpetuating the cycle. So part of it is teaching them to have a different reaction, to not have a reaction at all. It just won't feed the situation.
Wow, no, great insight. Thanks so much, Claire. Well, we'd love to hear your opinions, so jump on Facebook. We've got a group there we'd love you to join. Love to hear your opinions and your stories. Look, if your kid is being bullied, it's tough. It is real tough, and it just doesn't seem fair that it has to be you and your kid that have to sort of put strategies into place and find those resources. But unfortunately, sadly, that is part of the reality of dealing with this. But if you're a parent of a kid who is bullying, for goodness sake, don't ignore it. Do something about it. Get some help. Talk to your kid. And if you yourself are a bully, look, there will be consequences. You've got to realise that you're hurting people. You've got to wake up to yourself and just stop.